I still remember the coldness of the chair, the way the doctor avoided eye contact, the smell of antiseptic, the quiet click of a pen, and then the words, "It's stage 4. Just like that. No warning, no preparation. One moment, I was a retired grandmother planning my fall garden. The next, I was a statistic. I didn't cry. Not at first, I nodded. I asked about timelines. I took the folder of papers they handed me, filled with words I didn't understand, and I walked out into the afternoon sun as if nothing had changed. But everything had. That night, I sat in the kitchen, staring at the tea kettle. I could hear the tick of the clock on the wall, each second louder than the last. I didn't eat dinner, didn't sleep, didn't pray. I just sat there, a woman with a death sentence wrapped in a white envelope inside her purse. The next morning, I called my daughter. She cried more than I did. She wanted to fly in immediately, bring the grandkids, rearrange everything. But I told her not yet. "Let me process," I said. What I didn't tell her was that I wasn't sure I wanted anyone to see me fall apart. I was always the strong one. The one who held hands in the hospital, not the one lying in the bed. The one who baked casseroles and quoted scripture to the hurting. Not the one needing to be reminded that God still cared. For a week, I stayed home. I ignored calls, didn't go to church, didn't answer the door. I let the flowers on the porch wither. I left the dishes in the sink. I didn't open my Bible once because somewhere deep inside I felt betrayed. I had lived faithfully, loved people, tried my best to honor God. And now, this? But grief is strange. It doesn't always come with wailing. Sometimes it comes in silence, slow, creeping silence. By day 6, I was tired, not physically, soul tired. I sat in my bedroom, sunlight slanting through the blinds, and looked at my reflection. Hollowed eyes, thinning hair, skin pale with fear. I whispered just loud enough to hear myself. "If you're still there, God, I need you to show me." I didn't even know what I meant by that. That night, I dreamed of Robert, my late husband. He was sitting at the table smiling. He didn't speak. He just looked at me with those gentle eyes of his. I reached for him and woke up with tears on my pillow. In the morning, I opened the kitchen drawer to find a spoon and instead found an old index card. Yellowed, creased. It was in Robert's handwriting. I'd forgotten all about it. He used to write down Bible verses and tuck them around the house. This one said, "I will not die but live and will proclaim what the Lord has done." I sat down in the chair, the same chair I'd heard the diagnosis in. And I wept, because something stirred in me, not hope exactly, but hunger, a desire to believe that maybe, just maybe, the story wasn't over. I don't know what made me say it out loud. Maybe it was the card, maybe it was the dream, maybe it was the fact that I had nothing else left to try. But that evening, as the sun dipped below the trees and the wind whispered through the cracked kitchen window, I pulled out the same chair, the one Robert used to sit in, folded my hands and whispered, "God, I don't know what to ask for. I don't even know what to hope for. But if you're still writing my story, please don't let it end in silence." That was it. Nothing poetic, nothing grand, just honesty, a cracked voice, a trembling soul, and the tiniest spark of belief. I went to bed early that night, exhausted from a kind of weariness that even sleep couldn't cure. But I did sleep, deeper than I had in weeks. No nightmares, no tears, just stillness. The next morning, I shuffled to the front door in my slippers to get the paper, and there, resting on top of it, was an envelope. No return address, just my name. I stared at it for a long time, not because I was scared, but because part of me already knew this letter wasn't just a letter. It was an answer. I sat down at the kitchen table, hands shaking, and opened the envelope. Inside was a card, simple, cream-colored, no decorations. I opened it expecting some kind of generic message, but it wasn't. It was a Bible verse. the same one Robert had written on the old card I'd found in the drawer. I will not die but live, and will proclaim what the Lord has done. Same verse, same words, same punctuation, but in different handwriting. There was no signature, no explanation, just the verse. I stood up, looked out the window, down the street, no one. I checked the mailbox, empty. Checked my phone, no texts, no missed calls. And suddenly, the silence I'd been drowning in for weeks felt full again, full of something ancient, holy. I clutched the card to my chest and said one word, barely more than breath. Because deep down, I knew this was not a coincidence. Not after the prayer, not after the card I'd found in Robert's handwriting, not after the dream. This was an answer. Maybe not the answer I expected, but an answer nonetheless. That afternoon, the hospital called. They had reviewed my case again. A spot had opened in a clinical trial for a new treatment. One they hadn't mentioned before because it was full, because I didn't qualify, because the wait list was too long. But something had shifted. The nurse's voice was almost apologetic, like she couldn't explain it. We reviewed your latest labs, and, well, we think you might actually be a great candidate after all. She paused, then added, It's rare, Mrs. Adams, but sometimes things just open up. I hung up the phone and looked at the card again. Psalm 118. I whispered it once more, this time with strength I didn't know I had. I will not die, but live. And for the first time since the diagnosis, I started to believe it. Sometimes the miracle isn't a sudden cure. Sometimes it's a verse showing up twice in two different hands. It's a phone call you weren't supposed to receive. It's a quiet yes to a whispered prayer. I started treatment the following Monday. The hospital was bright, too bright. Everything smelled like bleach and metal. The IV burned a little. The nurse tried to be cheerful, but her eyes said everything. She'd seen this before. I sat in the reclining chair, surrounded by machines that beeped and buzzed. Others were in the room, too. Younger, older, thinner, weaker. Some smiled, some cried, some stared blankly ahead. I closed my eyes and breathed through my nose. I will not die but live. I whispered it to myself. The nurse looked over. Everything okay, Mrs. Adams? I smiled faintly, just remembering something important. The first few days were fine. Then came the nausea, the weakness, the bone-deep tiredness that no nap could touch. By week 2, I'd lost my appetite. My hair began falling out in soft, cruel handfuls. I watched it gather in the sink like autumn leaves. Quiet, undeniable. I tried not to cry, but one night, I caught my reflection in the mirror. No hair, no eyebrows, just a pale ghost of the woman I used to be. And I broke. I curled up on the bathroom floor, hugging my knees, and whispered, God, I don't know if I can do this. Silence, but then a whisper inside me, you're not doing this alone. It didn't come from the air. It came from the verse, from the card I'd placed on my nightstand, from the memory of Robert's smile. The next day, I dragged myself out of bed. I made tea, even if I couldn't drink much. I opened my Bible, not to read, but to hold it, like a hand in mine. I sat by the window and watched the trees swaying in the breeze, and I thought, if God can carry a tree through every season, maybe he can carry me through this one. Each treatment was a battle, but each day I fought. I started bringing a notebook to the hospital, writing down prayers, not long ones, just one line at a time. Thank you for today. Help me keep going. Let me feel you here. Sometimes I wrote the same thing 10 times. Sometimes I just wrote Psalm 118. A nurse noticed one day. Her name was Claire. Red hair, young, kind eyes. She smiled and said, You're the only one I've seen bring a prayer book in here. It's not a prayer book, I replied. It's a reminder. A reminder of what? I looked her in the eyes and said, that I'm not finished yet. She nodded. Neither am I. We didn't talk more that day. But something passed between us. Not words, but something deeper. Quiet hope. One evening, I woke at 2 a.m., drenched in sweat, trembling, a fever, a wave of nausea, my body telling me, enough. Thus, I reached for the phone to call the nurse hotline, but my fingers stopped. I turned my head and saw the card again. That simple, creased card. Robert's handwriting. The promise. I will not die but live. I pressed the card to my chest, lay back down, and said aloud, even if I'm scared, even if I'm tired, I'm still here and I trust you. Faith doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's a whisper, a hand holding a verse in the dark. The fire was still burning, but so was I. By month 3, I had stopped counting treatments. The calendar blurred. My skin was pale, my body weaker, but my spirit strangely steady. It wasn't that I wasn't afraid anymore. I was, but the fear no longer had a voice louder than my prayers. The card from Robert stayed on my nightstand. The verse from Psalm 118:17 was taped to my bathroom mirror, my fridge, even the inside cover of my notebook. It had become more than a verse. It was my battle cry. Then came scan day. The hospital always smelled the same, sterile, cold, too bright. I sat in the waiting room with a blanket over my knees, notebook in my lap, trying to calm the churn in my stomach. Claire, the nurse, walked by and gave me a wink. You're on my prayer list, she whispered. I smiled. Thank you. Keep me on it a little longer. She didn't say anything, just squeezed my hand. The scan was quiet. Machines hummed, lights flickered. My heart raced. Then the waiting began. 3 days. 3 long, slow, anxious days. I tried not to hope too much, tried not to prepare for bad news, tried not to rehearse the pain again, just tried to breathe. The call came on a Friday afternoon. I picked up, hand shaking. Mrs. Adams, the doctor said, voice level. I wanted to go over your scan results with you. Is now a good time? I sat down. Yes. Then, there's no evidence of disease. Silence. I blinked. What? Your body responded better than we expected. Remarkably better. The tumors, they're gone. Another pause. We don't say this often, but this is what we call a complete response. Still silence. I could barely breathe. You'll still come in for follow-ups, but for now, this is good news. I whispered, barely loud enough to hear myself. No, this is God news. After I hung up, I sat in the quiet of my living room, clutching the phone. The verse echoed in my heart again. I will not die but walked to the bedroom, took the old card from the nightstand, and held it in both hands. Robert, I whispered, you were right. He wasn't done with me. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just sat there, with peace, not the kind doctors can give, not the kind medicine can explain, the kind only God can leave behind, like a quiet fingerprint on your soul. That Sunday, I went back to church. I wore a headscarf. My hair still hadn't returned, but I didn't care. I stood during worship, hands trembling, and for the first time in months, I sang. My voice cracked, but I sang. Claire came too. She sat in the back, not a member of the church, just curious. After the service, she found me outside. I saw your scan result, she said. I don't understand it, I smiled. You don't have to. Then I handed her a small note, handwritten, folded in half. She opened it and read, I will not die but live and will proclaim what the Lord has done. Claire looked up, her eyes glassy. Mrs. Adams, you already are. Faith doesn't always stop the fire. Sometimes it carries you through it. Scarred, yes, but still standing. Sometimes it doesn't change the outcome. It changes you. 6 months later, my hair started to come back. Soft, thin, gray, but alive. I looked at myself in the mirror and didn't recognize the woman staring back. Not because I looked sick, but because I looked new, not younger. Not untouched, but deeply loved. I started volunteering at the hospital, just 1 day a week. At first, I served tea, passed out blankets, helped with paperwork. But slowly word got around. She's the one who beat stage 4, someone whispered. No, I corrected. I didn't beat it. God did. I just held on. They started calling me into rooms where patients were too scared to speak, rooms where families didn't know what to say, rooms where a bald woman sitting in the corner, smiling, meant more than any doctor ever could. I met a woman named Janice, stage 3, 56 years old, alone. She asked, "Do you ever stop being afraid?" I held her hand and answered truthfully, "No, but I stopped being alone in the fear." Then I gave her a small card I'd written out the night before. "I will not die, but live, and will proclaim what the Lord has done." She cried, not loud, but like I did, the kind of tears that come when something starts to thaw inside you. One day, Claire, the nurse who walked with me through it all, showed up at my front door. She had just finished her shift. No makeup, no smile. She looked tired. "Can I just sit here for a while?" she asked. "Of course," I said. We didn't talk much, but as the sun set, I reached into my Bible and handed her something. An index card, old, worn, Robert's handwriting. Her eyes widened. "You're giving this to me?" I smiled. "I don't need it the way I used to. I still pray every night. But my prayers have changed. I used to pray for God to take away the fear. Now I pray He helps me walk through it. I used to pray for healing. Now I pray for purpose. And I pray for you, the one watching this, the one reading this, the one sitting in the doctor's office right now holding back tears. You might feel like the story is ending, but maybe it's just beginning. If you're still breathing, you're not finished. If your heart still beats, God still has a reason. Even if your body is weak, even if your soul is tired, even if your faith is cracked and trembling, He is not done with you. Not today, not yet. I was ready to let go, but then God stepped in. Not with a trumpet, not with thunder, with a card, with a whisper in the dark that said, "You still have work to do, and so do you. I will not die, but live, and will proclaim what the Lord has done." Psalm 100. If this story touched your heart and you want to hear more powerful stories of faith, healing, and hope, please give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next journey we share together. I truly believe God is still working miracles every day, and maybe the next story we tell could be yours.